Hey everyone, my name is Seth Borko. I am the head of Skift Research, and it is such a pleasure to be here with you all today. Welcome you to our live webinar on the state of travel in 2025. If you're watching us live, thank you. I always like to say it's the Truman Show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We've got so many different time zones. If you're watching us live, thank you for joining us. Leave a comment and tell us where you're coming from. We have a global team here today. Like I said, I'm the head of Skift Research. I'm joined by our research manager, Varsha Arora from India, as well as our senior research analyst, Pranavi Agarwal from London. So you've got the global Skift Research team here. If you're watching us on a recording, maybe YouTube, maybe a different streaming platform, welcome and thank you for joining as well. What I want to do is pull up the slides and get a little bit started with this talk. This is our State of Travel 2025 presentation. And what we like to do is, this is our biggest report of the year. It's also our freest report of the year. So it's over 300 insights. Normally, Skift Research is a paid research product. You need to be a subscriber, but this one is free. It's free, by the way, with a thank you to our sponsors, Allianz and Epsilon, who made this a free report. And what I like to do with this report is, this is the actual report. This isn't like a slide deck. This is the actual PDF report. What I like to do is click through it, kind of do it almost like a live demo. So go to skift.com/state of travel, separated by hyphens, download the report and follow along, and you can kind of see how we do this. I already said thank you to our sponsors. I need to say a big thank you to our team, to the Skift Research team. We are a team of 7 analysts and an editor. They've basically been working all year on this. This is hundreds of hours of work going into this report. It pulls from third-party research, but also from all of our first-party research. It pulls from many of the reports that we publish throughout the year. If you are, for some reason, not familiar, somehow, some way, not familiar with Skift Research, we are the business intelligence and market research arm of Skift. We support Skift News. We support the events. We also support Skift Advisory, but we are also our own brand within Skift. We produce over 40 reports a year. We're actually on track for close to 50 this year. We cover all sectors of the travel industry. If you would like to be a subscriber, get access to the detailed reports, to the data, to the analysts like myself and the rest of the people listening to this call, please consider becoming a Skift Research subscriber as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about this year's report. And I like to do that by starting on our table of contents, because it really does show what a breadth of research that we have in this report. We have 12 different sections. We like to say it covers pretty much anything you could ever want to know about the state of travel. That's inevitably not true. I inevitably get a message from someone with a very specific niche, and I'm always fascinated at how deep and detailed the travel industry can be. But we do try and cover it all. And you can see we have consumer trends, industry trends, online travel, tours and activities, cruise. We've got a lot of sectors. We only have about 45 minutes today, so we're not going to be able to cover it all. So here's the agenda for how we're going to run this webinar. Each of us have picked 2 sections that we want to talk to you about. So that's 6 sections in total. We'll do about 5 minutes per section. We're doing some math. It's about 30 minutes of presentation from the Skift Research team. Varsha is going to talk about 2 different consumer trends. Pranavi is going to talk about hotels and online travel. I'll touch on the economy and on AI. We're going to give you kind of a sample platter, a little tasting of everything that we have on offer. We're going to show you how to use this report. We're going to click through it, and then we're going to take some questions. We're going to be about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. So if that sounds like a good plan, we're going to jump into it. I want to start by talking about the economic landscape, and I want to show you a bit about how this report works. These are actually hyperlinks, so we can click on it. We'll click on this. We'll go to the economic landscape, and we'll start right here on this slide. And so transitioning from intra-Seth to economy section, Seth, I want to talk to you about this, the Trump effect. We recently published some research on the second Trump administration, what it means for travel. By the way, every single slide is sourced, and if it comes from a research report, you can see the link here. So if you find this interesting, you go ahead, you click here, and this will bring you to the research report that the slide comes from, and you can really go deep into the data. That's how you use this report, right? Table of contents, navigate, read the slides, and then go to the report and learn more. Now, we did some research into what Donald Trump means for the travel industry. And we're not trying to get too political here, but we tried to quantify what does the travel ban mean? What does tariffs and trade mean? What's going on with government spending, with just an overall sentiment around travel, immigration, visiting the United States. We did some scenario analysis, and in our base case scenario, we came up with that we thought the Trump administration could be a $40 billion hit to the US travel industry. 40 billion. That is a huge number. But we have to be put in context because the US travel industry is a $1.6 trillion industry. The global travel industry is 11 trillion. And so what happens is 40 billion is a lot of dollars, but it's only about 1 to 3%, let's say, 2 to 3% of the US travel industry, and it's really nothing. It's kind of less than 1% of the global travel industry. So what I like to remind people and tell people to focus on is in the words of James Carville, it's the economy, stupid. Politics matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, and we're not trying to take too much of a stand whether you love Trump or hate him. What we're trying to say is that what really fundamentally matters is the economic environment. And I really like this slide to drive that point home. What we did was we looked at change in travel spending compared to change in the S&P 500, which is the large benchmark of US stocks, as well as change in travel spending compared to GDP growth. And what you can see very clearly is that in the short run, the stock market doesn't know anything about the travel industry. Whether stocks are up or down doesn't really matter. What matters is the economy growing? Are consumers feeling wealthier? Are businesses feeling more confident? And the good news is that despite all of the uncertainty, and there is certainly a lot of uncertainty, that overall, what we've seen in Q1 and now Q2 GDP is that consumers continue to spend, consumer spending continues to grow, and businesses continue to invest as well. I think that this slide actually does a nice job of putting it in context. One of those data products that Skift Research has, it's called the ST200. It's a global stock index of publicly traded travel companies. This looks at US publicly traded travel companies, and it looks at what Wall Street analysts thought revenue growth would be for publicly traded travel companies. You can see this is the number right here. We expected 6% revenue growth for travel companies at the beginning of the year. Today, it's closer to 4% revenue growth. So if you're a glass is half empty kind of person, that means that travel growth came down by a third. And that obviously sucks. And that is, that's kind of a self-own, so to speak, that didn't need to happen. But if you're a half full kind of person, if you're an optimist, you'll note that we are still going to grow travel industry revenue this year. And this is in the US. Across the globe, we will continue to see growth as well. This is from our Outlook, and it's a consumer survey sentiment. And what we saw was across the globe, travelers told us they intend to spend more on travel. And if you think about the context of that last slide, maybe they are going to spend a little less this year than they initially intended to because of the uncertainty, because of the sentiment. Maybe those booking windows get a little tighter. Maybe people wait a little bit longer before they pull the trigger on booking their trip. But we think the fundamental direction of consumers' intent to continue to spend on travel, to grow their travel spending this year, we think that remains intact. And we know that travel remains the discretionary purchase that consumers are most excited about. We said, out of all these discretionary expenses, what are you excited to spend your money on? Electronics, food, jewelry, fashion. Travel was number one, and it was number one in all 5 major markets that we studied. That includes China, India, Germany, UK. It includes major Asian and European markets that have a global perspective. So this is not just a US-centric thing. This is around the world. Travelers tell us they are excited to travel, that if they have the money to do so, they will continue to do so. The economic data says that although there is much more uncertainty and maybe shorter booking windows, the economic data does tell us that investment continues to grow and spending continues to grow. And that is our North Star for the travel industry. So yes, lots of confusion, lots of sentiment hits out there, and maybe some self-inflicted wounds that we didn't need to have, maybe slightly lower growth than we expected at the beginning of the year. But the overall economic landscape, the overall state of travel, we think remains healthy and supportive of steady growth through the end of the year and into 2026. So that's my economic piece. I'm going to turn over to Varsha, and Varsha is going to go through some consumer trends for us. And I'm going to just navigate ahead a couple of slides, and Varsha is going to give us a go.
Right. Thanks, Seth. Hello, everyone. I'm Varsha Arora from Skift Research, and I'm excited to walk you through some of the most compelling insights from the consumer trends section of the State of Travel 2025. Now, I want to cover two themes which I think are, sort of shaping the future of travel. One is the evolving nature of loyalty, is what I want to talk about, and the second is the rise of experiences, which is a very key driver of travel decisions. Let's start with loyalty. So, this slide that Seth has put up for us. Um, for years, it has been about brand love. We have talked about love and brand loyalty a lot. But if you see the slide here, which talks about the priorities of travelers when it comes to loyalty programs, what is it? Now, today, discounted travel and ease of rewards, as you can see, the top two are what really matter. Loyalty is gravitating from emotional connection to more of tangibility, of tangible value. If you can go to the next slide, please. So, the chart here, the next chart here is, sorry, the one before this set. Yes, this one. So you can see this from this chart that when travelers don't use their loyalty programs, it is actually often due to trip logistics, not brand disinterest. Now, what are the top reasons? If you look at the top two here, are flight schedules. They are better hotel locations. Price actually is on the third rank here. Now, think of a traveler who is skipping a points hotel, which is 40 minutes away from the town. That will not be counted as disloyalty, it is just practicality. So, the takeaway here is that loyalty needs to adapt to each trip's context. And the next slide here is the data from our proprietary loyalty stickiness index, which is based on the frequency that travelers book within their preferred loyalty program. Now, as you can see from the chart, airlines are scoring within the range of 60s, but hotels are much lower at 53. Again, to drive the point that this means that a lot of loyalty bookings are leaking out till date. So the signups don't always mean stickiness. And the next chart here compares travel to other sectors. This is one of my favorite slides, which sort of gives us a context, putting travel on, as compared to other sectors here. So we're comparing it to sectors like restaurants, apparel, luxury, retail, and travel performs the worst when it comes to loyalty stickiness. So, even among frequent travelers, we see high rates of booking outside their preferred programs. So, there's a sort of a growing gap between membership and behavior, consumer behavior. This is a very big red flag for the industry as we know it. And the last loyalty slide here from this section is very telling. If you see the labels on the left, travelers want perks, they want hotel quality, they want ease of redemption. And only 36% of them, the last bar that you can see on this chart here, they want a program that makes me feel valued. So, once again, functional benefits sort of take over emotional branding, is what we are trying to convey in this section. And now I would want to sort of shift to experiences, which would be slide 82. Okay. So as I said in the beginning, experiences is the new currency. We are, consumers are focusing on experiences a lot. And this chart here exactly shows that. So we asked travelers as to if budget is not a constraint, where would you splurge? Where would you spend? And the categories here, luxury stays, one of a kind activities, and premium flights are the top three. Now, again, like the takeaway here is that it's about emotional value, of course, it is also about uniqueness. That is what people are actually looking for in their travel journeys. Now, the next chart gives you a regional perspective, which means that when, as a business, you cannot just be counting on like a one size fit all kind of an approach, because there are differences. uh, if you see the chart here, India and China, they are sort of looking towards cultural and nature based trips, while US and Japan show lower interest across the board. So there is a clear reminder that localization matters a lot when it comes to experiences. And the next one also sort of aligns with this finding. It shows an interesting split. Indian and Chinese travelers are wanting new adventurous experiences, while Americans and Japanese travelers are wanting to stay in their comfort zones. They want to strike a balance between familiar destinations. Sort of they're skewed towards familiar destinations. So the takeaway for brands here is that they need to strike the right balance between novelty and nostalgia based on the particular market that we're talking about. And last one that I want to show you, the last slide that I want to show you is again one of my favorite insights. Roughly a third of travelers across all markets now prioritize immersive, local, and meaningful travel. You can see Japan and China are leading slightly here. This again sort of brings home the point that we're trying to say through the last three slides, that authenticity and connection are more important than extravagance. So, luxury has been redefined, experiences is the new currency. And just to wrap up, loyalty is no longer about emotional ties, it's about utility, flexibility, practicality, and experiences is what people are looking forward to, which is driven by comfort and unique experiences. And with that, I'll just want to pass it to Pranavi to sort of talk about her favorite sections.
Well, Pranavi's going to cover her favorite sections. I'm going to do a quick little mid-roll break. This is live streaming. I was going to call it live TV, but I guess we're live on the internet, and we do sometimes have technical issues. I think some of you may have missed our intro. So if you are wondering what the heck you've stumbled into, this is our State of Travel 2025 webinar and presentation. You've got two of the best minds in the Skiff research team and me talking you through our biggest report of the year, which is our State of Travel 2025 report, right? This is over 300 insights. It covers work from all around the year. We use all of our reports. We use third-party research. We put it all together and we create one big presentation. Not only is it our biggest report of the year, not only is it our deepest dive of the year, it is our freest report of the year. And it's our freest report of the year with thanks to our sponsors, which is Allianz and Epsilon. They are the folks that made this free report possible. Typically, a Skiff Research report would only be available to Skiff Research subscribers, which I've got to say, if you're not a Skiff Research subscriber, hey, if you're enjoying what you've heard so far, if you want to dive more into those details, well, that's how you get it. So Allianz and Epsilon made State of Travel free for all. You can go to research.com, to skiff.com/state of travel, download the report, follow along with us. And if you like what you see and you want to learn more, then consider becoming a Skiff Research subscriber. What we're doing is the three of us are going through, we're sharing our favorite slides. Again, back to that table of contents, we are covering pretty much, I'm trying to find it. We are covering pretty much the entire travel sector. There was far too much here for us to do on one webinar. So we've all picked two of our favorite sections. I just did an economic section. Varsha has done loyalty and experiences. And the wonderful Pranavi Agarwal is going to take us home with some thoughts on accommodations and online travel. And again, we are navigating, this is the real document. This is not a slide deck. We are navigating the real document to show you how we walk through it. So again, we're going to go actually click on this link and bring us forward to the accommodation sectors. And I'm going to throw it to Pranavi.
Great. Thank you so much, Seth. So if you go to slide 173 within the accommodation section, great. So for the next kind of two sections, I want to briefly talk about how hotels and online travel agencies might fare if there is a recession in the US. And recession is, it's of course a really key topic, and it's been for several years, and it's something we've written a fair bit about at Skiff Research this year. So briefly talking through some of the slides in this accommodation section of the State of Travel deck. So on this slide, we can see, I think this is a really powerful slide. I think it shows that the hotel industry is an industry that does follow economic cycles pretty closely, and travel being this inherently discretionary consumer spend item, it shows that if there is an economic downturn, travel demand will be impacted. And if you scroll on to the next slide, we can take a closer look at hotel economics. So this slide shows that when hotel demand exceeds hotel supply, hotels tend to have pricing power, and we see that there is pricing growth or ADR growth. And it also works in reverse. When supply exceeds demand, pricing growth tends to slow down. So pretty basic economics, and the travel industry does tend to follow it. And if you go to the next slide, we can kind of take a closer look at what supply and demand looked like in previous recessions, to try and get a gauge of what we might be entering if there is a recession today. So we can see that in the last major recession, which was in 2008, 2009, we were in a situation where supply peaked at 3% year-on-year growth, whilst demand kind of fell 5%, 6%. And what that led to was that there was a big drop in pricing, and in turn, there was a big drop in RevPAR. But if you go to the next slide, we can see that today the supply environment is very different than it was a decade ago. We can see that the supply growth is much more constrained than it was in 2008. Today, we're only growing at 0.5% year on year versus 3% in 2008. And if you keep scrolling along, we can see that it's these rising construction costs, it's tariffs, it's a tough financing environment that's really limited construction growth, and in turn, it has affected rooms being opened. And if you keep scrolling along as well, we can basically see that if there is a recession today, we believe at Skift Research that there won't be as extreme a drop in RevPAR as there was in 2008 because of this highly constrained supply environment. And we can see on this chart that supply and demand are growing fairly in line with each other. So that's a kind of very optimistic view on hotel industry. And to reiterate, if there is a recession, travel will be impacted, but we don't think that RevPAR will fall minus 15, 16% as it did in 2008 because of this very constrained supply environment that we're in. So that was a very quick kind of thesis on how hotels might behave in a recession. And now I want to skip to the OTA section, which is on slide 216. Yep. And we will briefly discuss how an OTA might fare if there is a recession today. So we can see on this slide that in 2008, 2009, that recession was a real catalyst for growth for the OTAs. And in the decade after the great financial crash, OTA market share went from 5% to 22% of the global hotels market by 2019. So OTAs were really gaining a lot of share in that decade past the global crisis. And if you go on the next slide, we can see that companies like Booking and Expedia was seeing huge growth in 2008. I mean, we can see here that Booking was posting double-digit growth, even though there was a global recession. In 2010, it was posting, 2011, 40% growth, which is just incredible. And, a lot of that was down to this natural rise of online penetration, but also because the OTAs were allowing consumers who were very price conscious at the time, they were allowing them to easily price compare on their websites. And they also consolidated a lot of the market. They really bought up a lot of their competitors. So that recession proved to be a big time of growth for the OTAs. If you go to the next slide, we can see that today the environment is not quite the same as it was a decade ago. We can see that growth for the OTAs has significantly slowed down. People might say that's pretty natural for companies as they mature over time. But I think crucially what this chart shows is that whilst Booking and Expedia were growing much faster than the major hotel brands just before the pandemic, during the pandemic and kind of into the next decade, what we will see is that both companies are expected to grow more in line with each other. And it just goes to show that there is a much more of an even playing ground between the two groups, kind of the major OTAs and the major hotels. And if you go on to the next slide, we can see, so this is some of our survey data. We can see that if there is an economic downturn, pricing will be absolutely crucial. And our survey data shows that nearly 65% of survey respondents said that they would prioritize price over service in a downturn. And if you keep scrolling along, it it just shows that today the environment is much more fragmented and much more competitive than it was. And even though price will lead as a consumer priority, it doesn't mean that the OTAs will pick up a lot of market share naturally as they did a decade ago. And that is because the distribution landscape is much more fragmented, much more competitive. We can just see the number of companies all bidding on Google's free auction here, all trying to get that consumer. And these are companies that are very visibly present on Google, and consumers can very easily price compare on a lot of these sites and go on to book. So it just shows how much more competitive the landscape is today. If we go into the next slide, so the next few slides kind of show kind of who are these competitors that have come onto the landscape. So new entrants like credit card companies are coming into the space. Credit card companies like Chase Travel, they've really gained market share rapidly over in the last few years. And if you go on to the next slide, kind of just harking back to what we were talking about, how hotels are coming back and are proving to be kind of valuable competitors to the OTAs, we can see that they're fighting back much more than they did in 2008. And our surveys show that there is increasingly, quote, demand leakage, whereby consumers are going to the OTAs for research, but then eventually booking directly on the direct hotel side. So this is all to say that the landscape is much more competitive than it used to be, and we're seeing all kinds of innovation come up, both from the incumbents, but also from new entrants. You know, we're seeing rise of social marketing, expansion into B2B channels, fintech, connected trips, new forms of loyalty, and those are all there to try and capture this modern consumer with real evolving needs. So with that, I'll pass back to Seth, who's going to talk about another big innovation in the space, which is, of course, data and AI.
Thank you for that, Pranavi. And yeah, great. We're going to talk about exactly. I think I was thinking that as you were speaking, that it is such a different landscape. And our final topic is going to be on AI. I do want to give a quick call out that if you found any of this data interesting, and I think I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, we have sources on every single slide with a link back to the report that it comes from. So if you saw this slide and you said, I want to learn more about this data, you click right here and you get to the report that it came from. And what I want to do is talk about AI. I think it's such a good point. What Pranavi is kind of, if I can sum up what she's saying, there's this old saying that generals always fight the last war, right? And what she's saying is don't fight the last war. Our base case is not for a recession, but even if there was a recession or just a slowdown in general, you will not be fighting the last war. It will be a very different demand, technology, supplier, distribution, technology landscape than it was during the pandemic or it was during the global financial crisis. And one of the things that's driving really accelerating change within the travel industry is technology, and especially artificial intelligence. I almost feel bad for the chief technology officers of some of these travel companies who I feel like they've just launched a generative AI product and someone's like, talk to me about agentic AI. That's why they get paid the big bucks. So I don't feel that bad for them, but you almost feel bad for them at how fast things are changing. But it's really exciting times. We have a whole section on data and AI in the state of travel this year. But one of the ones that I really want to highlight in just about 5 minutes, and by the way, after my 5 minutes are up, we will be taking questions. So if you are sick and tired of hearing of us, hang on 5 minutes, and then we're opening up for audience questions. But let's get back to this idea of tyranny of the search box, which is that for the last 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, travelers, no matter how they heard about your brand, no matter how they heard about your destination, your hotel, your airline, your tour, no matter what it is, word of mouth, you built a brand, they saw you on social media, they watched you on a TV show, no matter how they heard about it, they had to condense all of those ideas and fit them all into a search box, into a couple of keywords. That was the tyranny of the search box. And I was thinking about this a lot, actually, because I booked a trip with a travel agent. I'm going on a honeymoon and I used a travel agent. And I was thinking a lot about how in the old days, you used to have a conversation with someone. You could sit face to face with a person, talk about your hopes, fears, dreams, what you want to get out of your trip, and have a real conversation. Then the web came around, Google came around, and you still have those hopes, fears, and dreams, but it became incumbent on you to condense all those ideas into a couple of keywords that could fit into a search box. But with OpenAI, with ChatGPT, with Perplexity, even with Google AI search, we are increasingly in a world where we're going back to conversational. So it's not the end of search by any means, but it is potentially the end of certain keywords and certain search boxes, maybe in the future. We've done some really interesting research. We had partners on this Dune 7 and SEO Clarity. They gave us the raw data. This is proprietary data that we analyzed showing AI visibility on Google. So, right, traditionally, you would do a Google search, you would get a bunch of links, or maybe a Google Hotels search box or a Google Flights search box. Travel marketers would bid on those ads. They would get a spot. They would be high conversion digital marketing. It worked really, really well. But increasingly on Google, we are seeing these AI overviews, these conversational contextual search results powered by generative AI, and they are displacing the traditional search results. How often is that happening? That's what AI visibility measures. And what our data shows is that AI visibility has risen dramatically on Google. AI visibility on ChatGPT is 100%. AI visibility on Perplexity is 100%. Google is economically incentivized to minimize AI visibility. And even at Google, where the economic incentives are working in the opposite direction, we have seen effectively a quadrupling of AI visibility for travel-related search terms. That's what we're looking at here in this data, is the percentage of search results for core flight keywords that returned an AI overview. We went from 3% to 9%, tripling. In hotels, the order of magnitude is a little bit different, but the trend is the same. And this is on Google over the last 6 months or so. It's only going to accelerate from here. So we're going to see more and more AI search results, and it will not change the need for search optimization. It will not change the need for search marketing, but it might change what the search engine looks like. And that will have major ramifications for Google, for travel marketers, for destinations, hotels, airlines, for the entire ecosystem. I won't go too deep into the kind of methodology and some of the other insights. Again, you could go down here, click on this link, read the report. But I will say, Pranavi was talking about how Google democratized search, and there's more and more hotels and even airlines showing up in those Google Hotels modules. Maybe the opposite effect happened with AI, as AI needs to give contextual answers and needs to give you a couple of quick answers in a couple of sentences. Maybe we're seeing less and less sources. We're not exactly sure how it's going to play out. So I won't tell you 100% with certainty what AI means for travel, or what AI even means for search or marketing or the future of the travel industry. But I will say it seems like it is a major disruption that is on the horizon. And sometimes that's exciting. Sometimes that's scary. In fact, often when I talk to people, I go out on the road and I meet with many of you all, people tell me that they are anxious and scared about AI. And I'll be honest, sometimes I am as well. I think it's interesting to look back to the past of the web and what happened. People are worried about their jobs. Well, I was talking about travel agents, conversational to keyword. That was a huge disruption, and it did transform the travel industry, right? We saw the decline of traditional travel agents, the rise of online travel agents, and yes, it meant job loss. Travel agents lost jobs. Over the last 20 years, there's been a decline in the number of people working for travel agencies, and many of those jobs were lost, many for good. But it's important to put it in context, which is that the rise of the web grew the pie for travel. It made travel less intimidating, more accessible, made it easier for you to research where you wanted to go. It made it easier for small businesses to grow and thrive on the internet. It made it easier for people to share their trips, for word of mouth to grow, online reviews. It grew the pie. It made more people travelers. It made it easier to travel, and therefore more money was spent on travel, and therefore more travel jobs. And so what happened was we saw a concentrated loss of jobs in one sector, in travel agents, but overall we saw job growth for the travel sector, and overall we saw revenue growth for the travel sector. So when we think about AI, we need to have empathy and understanding for people who are rightly nervous about what AI can mean. We also need to keep our eye on that bigger picture, which is that this is probably going to make travel easier, more accessible, and that is a net good thing for the travel industry, and a net good thing for job security, and a net good thing for job growth. It also pushes us to innovate, right? This is the number of people working in technology roles at travel agencies over the last 20 years. There was about 2% of jobs at travel agents were tech jobs in 2003. Today, it's almost 7%. What's interesting is that disruption pushed the distribution sector to become tech heavy, to hire in tech focused jobs. But that did not necessarily happen on the supplier side of things, right? Obviously, in hotels, travel accommodations, or airlines, hotels and airlines, you need pilots, you need gate agents, you need housekeepers, you need front desk clerks, you need people. They're much more labor intensive. They're not digital kind of asset light businesses. But yet, I think it's worth asking, with AI, will have airlines and hotels underinvested in technology roles and technology jobs? And maybe with this change and this disruption and this rise of AI, we might see more investment in tech roles across not just the distributors like the travel agencies, but also across the suppliers like the hotels and airlines. We're never going to see 7% of jobs at an airline or a hotel in tech. I know that that's not realistic, but I do think we are set to see a rise in tech investment and tech jobs, and that's quite exciting for me, and that means a lot for innovation and a change in travel landscape. So I do like to end on a note of optimism, right? Disruption can be scary, change can be scary, and we can actually take down these slides. Change can be scary, disruption can be scary, the economy can be scary, sentiment can be scary. There's lots of stuff out there that can be scary. But the bottom line is that actually the state of travel is quite healthy, and we feel quite optimistic about the state of travel. We really would encourage you to focus on the North Star of the economy. That as long as businesses continue to invest and consumers continue to earn and have jobs, which is the case today, despite all the headlines, that will bode well for the travel industry. Travel is pretty much the purchase that people are most excited to make. Look to that North Star of the consumer, then do that analysis of consumer trends. Varsha talked about loyalty, about experiences. Think about, ask yourself, how can your brand, your product, your destination, your hotel, your airline, whatever it is, focus on those consumer trends, learn more about their customers, and meet their needs. Think about the change in landscape in hotels, online travel agencies across the space. To Pranavi's point, don't fight the last war. We're in a very different scenario than we were 10 years ago. If there is an economic slowdown, if there is more uncertainty, it won't be the same as 2008. It won't be the same as 2009. It certainly won't be the same as the pandemic. And we are much better equipped to handle these sort of things. That's one of the things I hear from people. There's nothing I can do. It's just it's an act of God. That's not true. There is a lot that you can do. You can invest in growth, and you can invest in technology and innovation. AI is coming. It's already in use. The visibility and the rise is happening at innovators and startups, but also at incumbents like Google. We're going to see this disruption come from the industry. Yes, we want to be caring for our people. We want to be understanding the fears. We also want to understand that it's a good thing. Innovation and technology brings job growth, brings economic growth, brings travel growth for our sector. And we're very excited about what the state of travel holds for 2025 and beyond. So we're going to wrap it up. I want to, again, remind you, State of Travel 2025. This is a free report. It's available to download at skift.com/state of travel, separated by dashes, skift.com/state-of-travel. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Epsilon and Allianz. They made it possible for this to be a free report. And if you want to learn more about the rest of the Skift research offering, you can use the QR code that we've shown on screen here several times. You can get a discount and sign up to be a Skift research subscriber. If you are a Skift research subscriber, you get access to the team you see here on your screen, as well as the full team, 8 analysts, and all of our data behind the scenes power in this report available for our subscribers. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you learned something, and we'll see you around next time.